why we need everyone's approval, and how to stop chasing it. Why do so many of us care so much about what other people think? Why can one small comment ruin our whole day? Why does being ignored feel so heavy? Why do we replay our words after every conversation, wondering if we sounded stupid, awkward, annoying, or wrong? I think a lot of people are living under the quiet pressure of approval, not just wanting to be loved because that is human, not just wanting to be respected because that is natural, but needing constant signs from other people to feel okay with ourselves, and that kind of life is exhausting because when your peace depends on approval, you are never really at rest. You are always adjusting, always performing, always reading reactions, always trying to stay acceptable. Today, I want to talk about validation, why we chase it, why it feels so powerful, and why building your life around other people's approval can slowly make you lose yourself. The truth is, most people do not start out obsessed with approval for no reason. Usually, it begins earlier than they realize. Maybe you were praised only when you achieved something. Maybe you learned that being easy, quiet, impressive, attractive, or useful made people treat you better. Maybe love felt connected to performance. Maybe acceptance felt conditional. Maybe being yourself did not always feel safe. So over time, you adapt. You start becoming the version of yourself that gets the best response, the one that causes the least trouble, the one that is easier to like, the one that knows how to fit. And at first, this can look like maturity, like social skill, like being well adjusted. But if you are not careful, it can become self-erasure, because there is a difference between being thoughtful and becoming edited. There is a difference between being kind and becoming false. There is a difference between growing as a person and slowly abandoning your real self just to stay approved. This is what makes validation so dangerous. It does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks normal. It looks like saying yes when you want to say no. It looks like laughing when something bothered you. It looks like posting for attention and pretending you did not care. It looks like being afraid to disappoint people even when disappointing them is the honest thing to do. It looks like constantly wondering, how am I being perceived? And when that question becomes stronger than who am I really, something starts to break inside, because you cannot build a peaceful life while constantly auditioning for acceptance. One of the hardest truths to accept is that approval feels good, but it is unstable. People change, opinions change, attention comes and goes. Praise is temporary. Even people who love you will not always agree with you, understand you, or approve of every choice you make. So if your identity depends on being approved by everyone, your identity will always feel fragile. That is why some people seem confident on the outside, but fall apart over one cold reaction, one criticism, or one moment of rejection. Because what looked like confidence was often just successful approval seeking. Real confidence is different. Real confidence is quieter. It does not mean you never care what people think. It means their opinions are not the foundation of your worth. And that changes everything. Because once you stop depending on approval to feel valuable, you stop negotiating your soul every day. You speak more honestly. You choose more carefully. You set clearer boundaries. You stop begging to be chosen by people who only liked the edited version of you. And yes, that can feel lonely at first, because whenever you stop performing, some people become uncomfortable. Not because you became bad, but because they were benefiting from the version of you that was always agreeable, always available, always easy to shape. And this is where growth becomes painful. You start realizing that some connections were built more on your compliance than your truth. Some people liked your silence, not your honesty. Some people liked your flexibility, not your full humanity. Some people liked that you needed them. That realization hurts. But it also frees you, because it shows you something important. Approval is not always love. Sometimes approval just means you are being convenient. And a lot of people stay trapped for years because they confuse being accepted with being known. But being accepted for a false version of yourself is not peace. It is emotional rent. You keep paying for belonging by hiding parts of who you are. Eventually, that becomes too expensive. So, how do we stop chasing validation? I think the first step is noticing where your need for approval is running your life. Where do you become less honest? Where do you shapeshift the most? Who makes you feel like you have to earn your place? What kind of rejection scares you so much that it controls your behavior? These questions matter because they reveal the places where your freedom is weakest. The second step is learning to disappoint people without feeling evil. This is hard for many people, especially those who were taught that being good means always being pleasing. But disappointing someone does not automatically mean you were wrong. Sometimes it means you finally told the truth. Sometimes it means you chose your peace. Sometimes it means you stopped over explaining yourself to people who were never going to be satisfied anyway. A lot of emotional growth is simply this: becoming able to survive other people misunderstanding you. Not every false opinion needs correction. Not every rejection needs panic. Not every person who leaves was meant to stay. The take us because approval seeking wants to fix every impression. It wants to control every narrative. It wants to make sure no one thinks badly of you. But that is not possible, and trying to achieve it will exhaust your whole life. The third step is building self respect in private. This is important because if you do not respect yourself deeply, you will keep borrowing your worth from other people. Self respect is built quietly. It is built when you keep your word to yourself, when you say no and mean it, when you stop explaining every boundary, when you choose long term peace over short term applause, when you make decisions you can live with even if not everyone claps for them. That is how inner stability is built. Not through motivation, not through pretending not to care, but through repeated honesty. And I think one of the most beautiful signs of maturity is when a person no longer needs to be admired to feel whole. They still appreciate love. They still value respect. They still enjoy being seen. But they are not starving anymore. They are not begging for emotional permission to exist. They do not need every room to approve of them before they can breathe. That kind of freedom is powerful because when you stop chasing approval, you can finally start asking better questions. Not, do they like me? But do I like who I become around them? Not, how do I avoid judgment? But what is true for me here? Not, how do I stay wanted? But what kind of life actually feels honest? Those questions lead somewhere deeper than validation ever can. So if you have been feeling trapped by what people think, maybe this is what you need to remember. You do not need everyone to understand you. You do not need constant praise to be valuable. You do not need to be approved by people who only love the version of you that stays small. You are allowed to be honest. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to outgrow role that once kept you safe. You are allowed to disappoint others in order to stop disappointing yourself. Because in the end, a life built on approval may look stable from the outside, but inside it feels like fear. And maybe real peace begins the moment you stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and start asking, "What kind of person do I want to be when no one is watching?" That is where your real life begins.